Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode here of the Martech Show. I am very excited today with our special guest, Jim Ewel, who I'll introduce in a moment. But first, I wanted to share a quick announcement with you. Those of you who had attended the Martech conference a couple weeks back and the keynote that I delivered on 5 trends in marketing technology for the decade ahead, I'm very excited that that work was actually part of a joint research project I did in collaboration with the team at WPP. And we have turned that into, well, what started as an article and kind of grew into something that's almost like, oh, goodness, almost half a book here. But we'll be releasing that this coming week. So keep your eyes out for that. But speaking about books, we don't have half a book for you today. We have a full book, an amazing full book. Jim Ewel, who is the author of The 6 Disciplines of Agile Marketing, is joining us. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Scott. How are you?
Good, good. I am so excited to have you here. You know, as you know well, you know, but for the benefit of our listeners, you know, Agile marketing is still a relatively new thing. You know, it started, you know, folks started transferring some of these ideas from, you know, the Agile software development world in like, you know, 2009, 2010, you know, and there were just a handful of people who were really the early champions and pioneers, you know, of figuring this out and practicing it with teams and sharing their knowledge and insight with the community. And Jim, you were like one of, you know, a handful of the real leaders in this space. You've contributed so much over the years to the community, you know, the work you've done, you know, both, you know, running companies yourself and, you know, applying these principles there, but also in training and consulting with a tremendous number of other firms. And so I was so excited, you know, when you told me a little while back that you were like distilling so much of that wisdom and experience into a book that has just come out, The 6 Disciplines of Agile Marketing. Tell us, how did this come about? What's the book about?
Well, Scott, as you said, I've been doing this for some time. I've been blogging about, I've been practicing in my own companies. I've been teaching and training Agile marketing for just about 10 years now, all right? And I'm excited to be on here too, because you were one of my early inspirations. You wrote a blog post about some thoughts about adapting the Agile Manifesto to the Agile Manifesto for software developers to marketing, right? And that led to the Agile Marketing Manifesto, which you were part of, and what we called Sprint Zero. And so this book, I wanted it to be a different kind of book. You know, you and I talked a long time ago about doing a book together. And, you know, not many people know that, but
many years ago, yes.
Many years ago, right? And I think rightly so, you recognize that we had thoughts about different books, really, right? And you went on to write what I would call the seminal book of introducing, you know, through hacking marketing, okay, to people about Agile, and really provided the thought leadership and the intellectual foundation for what we're doing today. So I wanted to do something different, and for me, this book is much more based on that 10 years of experience and trying to distill down that 10 years into some proven practices that I've found that help people adopt and practice Agile marketing. Okay, so it really was meant to be a very pragmatic book and to provide, I guess you'd call it a framework. I'm not a real fan of that term, but you know, some thoughts about how to begin to adopt Agile marketing, and then also a lot of little nuggets, for lack of a different term, of things that I've found over the years really help people in practicing Agile marketing. So if
So,
you want to go to the next slide, go ahead.
yeah, it's going to beg the question of, okay, the 6 disciplines, what are those 6 disciplines?
Sure. Well, here you see them, okay? Alignment, structure, and so forth. I won't read them to you. But these 6 disciplines came about through, learning and quite frankly, failing. The thing about Agile marketing is that you try something out and, a lot of times it doesn't work, and I think I always learn more from my quote failures, the things that don't work, than I do from the things that work. And so let me give you an example of that is part of this 6 disciplines. So when I first started teaching Agile marketing, I started with process, right? I started teaching people how to adopt Scrum and Kanban and Scrumban to marketing, right? And that's what I started with, was that process management. And what I found is that people didn't get as much success. They didn't really get the full benefit of Agile if they simply started by learning Scrum and Kanban and so forth, right? So a lot of people are tempted, let's go get Scrum certification, and that's how we're going to start our Agile practice, right? And what I found is that it made more sense to get people first aligned on, why are we doing this? Why are we talking about
why?
Agile marketing? Well, I mean, look, change is hard. We were talking before this call about change management, right? And I think change management and adopting Agile marketing is one of the most important things that you can do. And part of that change management is one, and I do this exercise called Find Your Why with in my classes. And the Find Your Why doesn't start with the why, actually. It starts with what's working today and what do we want to make sure that we keep and don't destroy or damage, okay, as we adopt Agile marketing. Because for people who are, most of us are resistant to change, or we're worried about change or that sort of thing, it comes about because there's some things that we like about the way things are today. And we want to make sure that we don't lose those things. So I always start with that. Then I go to the why. And I sort of have 3 parts to the why. One is just the what's not working so well today. Okay, what do we want to fix? What do we want to change in going to Agile marketing?
It's almost like start with the retrospective, it seems like, but not like a retrospective of a sprint. Like start with the retrospective of like, how are we doing as an organization? How are we doing as a team?
What could we do better, right? So that's the first question. The second question is, what would success look like? Okay, and I mean that qualitatively. Like if we were to have the success that we want to, what would it actually look like? And I asked them to get detailed about that and to talk about how that would change, their daily lives, how it would change their relationship with other departments, how it would change the work they do, the results of the work they do, all that sort of stuff. So get specific about that. And then the third question is, how are we going to measure whether we're successful or not, right? I mean, in Agile marketing, we're all about measuring rather than just opinions, right? And so we should apply that to our practice of Agile. How are we going to know that we are being successful? What are the 1, 2, at most 3 things that we are going to measure to say, okay, we really are doing better. So that's the whole discipline of alignment. And I go into a little bit more things about getting aligned with the business unit, getting aligned internally on what your marketing messages are and that sort of thing. But the big thing up front is just alignment on why are you doing Agile marketing.
I think that's brilliant because, I mean, I'm sure you've heard like every possible myth and criticism of agile marketing, probably 10
Sure.
times more frequently than I have. But yeah, I mean, it's just, this like standard kettle of things of like, oh yeah, well, we implemented that and, nothing really
Right.
changed and,
Right.
was
It's
effective.
just a buzzword,
Yeah, and
all
so
that
by
stuff.
saying, okay, well, let's turn this on its head. Let's start with like, what do we actually want to be, successful at? What do we want to be different?
Right.
And then, yeah, using that as a guidepost of, okay, is everything else that then comes, and I'm eager to hear about the other things that come, but, are
Yeah.
we measuring them against what really matters? And so you have no excuse for getting to the end and saying, yeah, we tried that and nothing really changed.
Well, and one of the things that happens when people say, we tried that and nothing really changed, there's two things that they're probably not doing. Okay. The first is, do they really have a measurement? And did they upfront say, okay, this is the thing that we're going to measure before and after? Okay. And then the second thing is, we tried that. Usually that means, okay, we did some daily stand-ups and we ran a sprint or two or whatever. As you know, there's a lot more to Agile than just that. Okay. And one of the things is the second item, the structure. And that really has to do with cross-functional teams. I really believe that cross-functional teams are one of the superpowers of Agile. Okay. And people don't use them enough. Now, I'm not advocating that people reorganize into cross-functional teams completely and reorganize their entire organization, when they start. I advocate that they start small, that they start with one or two cross-functional teams, try it out in their environment with some specific either business unit or business problem they're trying to solve. But they try it out for something specific, and then they learn through that, how do cross-functional teams work in our environment. And once they do that and they learn and they get one to be successful, then they add additional cross-functional teams. And even when they get very good at it and things like that, not everything's going to go in across functional teams. You're still going to have people who are in what I call skill set silos, but skill set groups, and that's fine. You can have a mix of cross functional teams and skill set, but that whole thing about getting the structure right and making sure that you're trying out cross functional teams, I think is super important.
It's funny. It's like one of the things I think you would take as like a sign that, okay, something is a fundamental truth is, the labels we use for things, are constantly changing and everyone's trying to invent their new label, but like if you set the labels aside and you look at the actual structure of, okay, what's innovating? Like I was recently reading on this trend of, it's become a bit of a hot management concept of, what we need? We need pods. What is a pod? It's a small cross-functional team. I'm like, okay, you guys have
Absolutely.
reinvented, what basically, yeah, Agile was championing to begin with.
Right.
But, if we're not going to get picky about the labels, it's like, wow, the fact that, people keep independently coming to the same conclusion, that's a really solid mechanism for getting stuff done.
Yeah.
I think that's actually, yeah, a really good sign to indicate that, yeah, this isn't a buzzword sort of thing. This is like a fundamental capability characteristic of being really successful.
Right. So the third discipline is process management. This is the one that people think of the most when they think about Agile. So this is Scrum, Kanban, and Scrumban. The thing that I tried to do in the book is to really show how you adapt those processes to marketing. Like I do a brief introduction to what they are, but I'm not trying to teach a detailed course in Scrum in the book. That would be impossible. But what I do is to say things like, what's the difference in terms of how developers use user stories and the way marketers should use user stories? I think there's a fundamental important difference between those, and that marketers use them in a totally different way. And so that means that they should write them in a different way and use them in their backlogs in a different way. And so there are things like that that I try to adapt to marketing and
Actually,
show in the process management.
could you just double click in on that? Because I'm sure now a lot of listeners are like, oh, well, actually, how do marketers, should they use user stories differently?
Yeah, so I have 3 sons who are developers, and so I see very much how they use user stories. And the user story comes into their backlog, and they're very, very detailed, highly detailed. Okay, a little small piece of what they're doing, and then they implement that user story. And once they implement it, that user story is done. Right. So with the marketers, one, the user stories tend to be less specific. They tend to be more general things of what the users are trying to get done. Okay. Second thing that's different is that for marketing, user stories should involve emotion or I always say that people buy from the heart, not the head. And so the user story has to identify what is the emotive reason, not just the intellectual reason, for someone when you satisfy this user story for them, what's that emotion that they're going to feel? What's the impact on them sort of emotionally? Because that's why they buy, okay, is from here, not here. So that's another difference. And then the third difference is that when we satisfy user stories as marketers, we don't satisfy it one time. We often satisfy it 4 or 5 times. So, for example, let's say that we have a user story about someone trying to sell agile marketing to their CMO. Okay, as a mid-level manager, I want to convince my CMO. And you can go through the user story. Well, if you're telling that, you're going to probably deliver that as a podcast, as a YouTube video, as a blog post, as a a little document like you just did. You showed at the beginning of the show. I mean, you're going to have 5, 6 different ways of satisfying that user story. That's not something that developers typically do, and so I think that the backlog consists not so much of user stories, but of what I call deliverables, which are tied to a user story. Okay, and then tasks, which may not be tied to a user story. And I go into the difference between deliverables and tasks, but the big difference is that tasks are not tied to a user story, and there's just sometimes things that we have to do in marketing that aren't tied to a user story. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Boy, I see. I gotta be careful with my time management here, because for like each one of these things, I've got like a ton of questions. But I suppose the call to action to people should be, buy the book. But please continue around the circle here. Let's talk about validated learning.
Yeah. So there was this term that was going around a few years ago, growth hacking. You still hear it some, okay? And I never quite bought into the term, okay? Partially because there were times when I saw the need to validate something that wasn't about growth, but it was also about learning about customers and what I would call product market fit and things like that. So, but validated learning is that process of figuring out what our customers need, what they respond to, optimizing our promotions, all those kinds of things with data and analytics. Okay, and it is the core of increasing what I would call marketing's metabolism. Right. So I think one of the things that people want from Agile is the ability for marketing to kind of move faster. But one of the things that's important to understand in this moving faster, it's not just about producing more content, okay? You talk to most users, the last thing they need is more content, more emails in their inbox, more stuff to read, more stuff like that, right? That's not what it's about. It's about producing better business outcomes, which gets me to another part of that's one of my shifts, that I talk about in the next slide. But anyways, the validated learning is about a marketing metabolism that generates business outcomes at a faster pace. Okay, and it's that turning the crank faster that is at the heart of validated learning.
Cool. All right, adapting to change.
Well, that's a core part of Agile. And to a certain extent, the very processes of Agile, things like having just 2 week sprints and setting your priorities every week or 2 weeks or however often you do your sprints and things like that. Those things do help you adapt to change. But I realized that there were more things than just the processes that we think of Agile. Things like, for example, having a, a brand damage response team. That's one of the things I suggest people have. Like, like if you're Volkswagen and you produce diesel cars and it becomes public that you've been cheating for years, it shouldn't take you 6 months to respond to that, but it did them, because let's face it, they did not have a team that was in there in advance to deal with this problem. And, we all have disaster response plans for earthquakes and tornadoes or hurricanes or whatever. But boy, even more likely damaging to our business are things that happen to our brand. And so we ought to have a brand damage response team. So that's one example of adapting to change that I talk about. There are other things that talk about adapting to gradual change and how do you adapt to, well, sudden things like COVID-19 and what do you do there? And so there were a bunch of topics that I felt like I needed to write about in adapting to change. And then the last one is creating remarkable customer experiences. I almost had 5 disciplines, to tell you the truth, okay? It's true. I put this one in because I felt that as marketers, we needed to be more than just stewards of the brand. We need to be stewards of the customer experience. I mean, if you look at the best companies out there and you look at their customer experiences with the product, but also with how people buy from them, there is an aspect of marketing in there. There's an aspect of getting people to think that experience is remarkable in the Seth Godin meaning, right? In the sense that it's both a great experience, but also that people talk about it, they remark about it. And that requires that marketers kind of get out of just their department and they really learn how to work with the product groups and the finance groups and the people who take the calls from customers and all that sort of stuff. And that, I really think that marketers need to kind of get out of that shell and get out of just, we are the ones who are doing the marketing, and start thinking about how do we impact the entire customer experience. So that's what I wrote about in that.
Oh man, this is terrific. I think you've done a brilliant service here to Agile marketing movement, because yeah, I mean, certainly the stuff in the middle here, the structure, the process management, the validated learning, I mean, that's a lot of the actual work that happens in Agile marketing. But I feel like so many of the misunderstandings with Agile are because people aren't starting with the alignment, that you really focused on. And then what is this all building towards? Like, what's the purpose of this, new way of working? And you've nailed it. It's like, what matters is we deliver these remarkable customer experiences, and that should tie back to the alignment of what's working, what's not working.
And the business outcomes and so forth. So if you go to the next slide, Scott, just I'm conscious of time.
Okay, actually, and let me take this moment to say, for those of you who are in our live studio audience, I still get a kick out of saying live studio audience over like a Zoom event. It just sounds so cool. Thank you for being here. And if you would like to use the Q&A function to pop in a question to Jim, this is a great opportunity to ask one of the experts of the Agile world anything you want on Agile. And then after we get past this next slide, any questions coming in there, I'll actually promote you up to be a participant. You can ask it live with or without video. It's your choice. So ask away. All right, Jim, talk to us here.
Okay, so the 6 disciplines were aimed at helping individuals and teams adopt Agile, okay, in their marketing. But what I found is that wasn't enough, that you had to also have some changes in what I call the beliefs and behaviors of the organization, right? And the most obvious way that showed up is that when you started talking about Agile, the individual contributors and the first line managers started saying, it's great, we're going to be empowered under this, okay? And then the managers would say, whoa, 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 you're not ready to be empowered. We got to keep making the decisions, right? And there was this whole tension between the top level managers and those who were doing the work. By the way, on that particular thing, they're generally both right, in the sense that, yes, they need to shift it down to do decentralized, decision making. But the managers are right in the sense that oftentimes people at the lower levels may not have the skills, although often they do, but more importantly, they may not have the information that they need to make the best decisions. Yes, they have the information to be closer to the customer, but they may not have some information about, what the organization is trying to do and the big picture stuff and so forth. So there is some effort on both parts to make these shifts, okay? So the 4 shifts, I kind of already talked about outputs to outcomes. This is just a change in the mindset from we as marketers are a content factory to we as marketers take responsibility for generating business outcomes, right? We're going to take accountability for that. It's not just about being empowered, it's also about accountability, all right? The second shift is from a campaign mentality to continuous improvement. This is a hard one for many marketers because oftentimes marketers like to get things perfect before they show it to a customer, right? We can't possibly put it out there before it's ready. Well, yes, we can. Okay. How many YouTube videos have you seen that have gone viral that have really bad production values, right? It doesn't have to be perfect to test particularly in a small audience, whether it's going to work or not. And why not test it to find that out before you invest a ton of effort in making it perfect, right? So changing that mentality from, hey, we got to do a campaign which has a campaign brief, and then it has this whole process and all that stuff, the waterfall process of that, to, hey, we're going to get something out there quick, we're going to test it in a small audience, and then once we get it working, we'll put it out to a broader audience. That's a change in mindset.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, so, you had mentioned earlier, thank you for the kind shout out on that early blog post I wrote. How I came to that was I was working in the field of conversion optimization, right? We were being hired by companies, to test new things that would work. And of course, Agile is just clearly such a great operating system for being able to do that. But it fascinated me then that, frankly, even through today, the amount of experimentation that I see marketing teams doing, it's not a lot. It still feels like we got all this technology that would let us so easily do all kinds of A/B testing and other experiments, and people just aren't doing that. And I guess I'm wondering, if you've decided to do experimentation, okay, then Agile marketing, very quickly becomes like, okay, this is a great way to run this and operate this. I guess I'm kind of hoping that, things like your book here, are going to help people to, take it from the other perspective of, all right, we're developing, this discipline of being more agile, and okay, as part of this, well, obviously, we're going to get into this, culture of testing, or, I mean, why isn't this happening more?
Well, I wish I knew the answer to that. I have a few thoughts about it. One is, I do think it's going to take some really visible success stories where people talk about that this thing didn't just come out of, the brilliance of their mind, what's the show, Mad Men? Okay. I think that really did a disservice to marketing, because that represented, marketing people as people who drink all day and then suddenly come up with brilliant ideas, right? And
that's why I got into marketing. Boy, what a disappointment.
Scott, I've known you for a long time. That's not you, okay? It's not you. And it's not me either. But, so I think, this is an older example, but you remember the commercial for Old Spice that sort of revigorated their brand? You know, the man, something about the man you wished to be, or something that your wife wished you were, or something like that. Anyways, they had that guy with that cool, the football player and all that sort of stuff. They did these, amazing commercials. People don't know about that. And there's this radio interview of the guys who produced it. Is they went through a year and a half of versions of that ad before it finally hit, and hardly anybody saw the old versions. And by the way, they got them. They hid them because they wanted it to seem like it was just a sudden thing. It wasn't. Okay, it took them a year and a half of fiddling with it to get the right formula to make that thing. It's like when people say, "Oh, make me an ad to go viral." Well, that just doesn't happen. I mean, there's certain things you could do, but a lot of that comes about through trial and error and continuous improvement. It doesn't come out just magically out of somebody's head. And so I think we need people to talk about that and do a few examples of that. Okay. The third shift is from internally focused to customer focused. Now, this is a bit of a tricky one because nobody says, "Oh, I'm not customer focused." Okay, everybody says they're customer focused, but this has to be more than just happy talk. This has to be something where you really are spending dollars and time. One, getting out of the building, right? I think it's Steve Blank in his book to entrepreneurs said, "There are no facts inside the building, so get out of the building." And I think that's true for marketing too. There are no facts here. Go talk to some customers. Go ask some customers what they want. Okay, and really make your stuff customer focused based on real conversations and real data. Okay, too many of us say, "Yes, I know. I'm going to build this." This customer persona, and it's all based on what we think, and we haven't talked to a customer in 6 months. I know I've been guilty of that in the past. Okay, so get out there and spend some money and time on the customers. And then the last piece is top down to decentralized decision making, and I picked the term decentralized because not all decisions are going to be made at the bottom of the pyramid. It really is a case of figuring out which decisions get made where, and instead of making all of them centrally, deciding we're going to do some of them centrally and we're going to push down other decisions so as to free up the executives to make the most important decisions. So I did that instead of distributed decision making was the other word I considered there.
Cool. Well, listen, I see we've got already one question that's come through from Louise. So Louise, I'm going to promote you here that, feel free to just ask out loud. What would you like Jim to answer?
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Jim, for doing this. I'm looking forward to reading your book. So hopefully at the end, you'll give us some information on where to get it if you'd like us to buy it direct. So we implemented, I work for a medical device company, and we implemented Agile earlier in 2019. And we did kind of trip over ourselves on your little circle here, right? Maybe starting in the wrong place. But one of the challenges we faced was we had a project management system that we then needed to modify to be able to track all of our marketing projects.
Right.
And modify it to the sprint process and figure out how am I going to take all the stickies that I've got in the boardroom and put them into this project management system and track them through sprints. And what we found was that the system that we used and the systems that we were looking at, they weren't ready for Agile. And maybe it was just too soon. They market themselves that they're ready for Agile and they write blog articles about Agile, but when it comes down to it, they're really not set up for it. So my question to you is, are there certain project management systems, if you were going to embark on Agile, that might be a good place to start, that are ready and set up and can help promote the process of Agile marketing?
Louise, I'm so glad you brought this up because this is one of the big problems right now in adopting Agile. Too many people are adopting it with tools that weren't designed for Agile. They may have slapped a lipstick on that pig, to be able to say that they're agile or whatever, but at the heart, they are what I call ticket-based systems, right? You put in a ticket for something and you check the box, I got the ticket done, sort of thing. So I think the best systems today are very visual systems, and quite frankly, they're Kanban board systems at their heart, okay? And there are a number of ones out there. I'm not going to mention any particular one because there are pros and cons of the different ones out there. But if it's not designed from the ground up and it didn't get started as a visual Kanban-based board, I'm skeptical of it, to be quite frank about it. I think there really is something to being able to see the status of something visually and how it moves across that process. You can see the process of, and the visual indicators, like, if something's blocked, it's got a big stop sign on it, or if something is due in a certain number of days, it has the due date on it, or, those kind of visual things. When I teach this about Kanban, I show people the example of a Starbucks cup. Can you imagine if at Starbucks that they manage the system by passing around the register receipts, okay, and trying to read those, okay? It would just be much less efficient. If you look at the Starbucks cup, it's brilliant. It's actually a Kanban. It's a card that you can read. That's what Kanban means, right? And you can instantly see, if you're a barista, that, okay, this is a white mocha with blah, blah, blah. They read those things in an instant, okay, because they're visual, okay? We are visual processors. We process visual information something like 10,000 times faster than we process the written word. And so I think whatever tool you use, it needs to be visual. And the one that I know the best are the Kanban boards. A lot of times people will say, well, we can't change. We've been using this tool forever. I'm sorry. If it's going to increase your productivity, and it will by 2x, 3x, 4x, a whole lot, it's worth the change. Sometimes people will say, well, we can't do it because the developers use this other tool. You don't have to be on the same tool as the developers. I don't believe that, okay? I think you need to be on a tool that works for the entire organization. And that isn't necessarily the tool that works best for developers. So I don't know. Let me get off my soapbox on that answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thank
for the
you,
question.
Louise. All right. If anyone else has questions for Jim, throw them in that Q&A. While we're waiting for anyone else to come in, Jim, I'd love to get your perspective on this. So, when Agile was first getting started, certainly with software teams, but then also, when it made the leap into marketing, that small cross-functional team, it seemed like one of the dynamics that was really important was actually having people together, like having them in a room, being able to share a whiteboard, and, just some of those dynamics. And, over the years, we saw teams that adapted to having some of it in person and some of it remote. Here in 2020, yeah, it's all remote all the time. I'm just curious, have you seen, how has that impacted or shifted or changed the way, just some of these rituals or structures work?
Well, it has absolutely changed things. I do think you can still have a cross-functional team in a virtual environment and get, I'll call it 80%, who knows what real percent it is, of the benefit of doing that, because you still have people who, for example, at the beginning of a process, they really get a deep understanding of why are we trying to do this and what does success look like and so forth. And I say that in terms of people that their actual work that they do is later in the process. So for example, if you're generating a new display ad and you've got the creative person, rather than do a creative brief, if they can sit in on the sessions where you hash out what are you trying to do here? What are you trying to make happen? And they can hear the alternatives, that helps them design better creative. I really believe that. I think that something is lost in translation whenever you have to write it down into a creative brief and then brief somebody else. So I think that there's still the benefit of that because you're participating in those discussions. What you don't get is the body language and the, all the other stuff that you get when you're there in person. And I think that that's going to shift over time. So a couple things are, I think that we are going to go to a new normal. I don't think we're going to go back to everybody in the office all the time. I was talking to one of my sons yesterday, and he said that what his team is, what they're doing is that they are 4 days a week working from home and 1 day a week going in. So they're working 4 10-hour days during the week, and then they go in on Friday, and they're not necessarily trying to get a lot of work done. They're more trying to interact with other people, see what's going on with them, make those personal connections, all that sort of stuff. And I don't know if they're doing that yet with the COVID, there, but that's their plan on how they're going to do things, after we sort of get beyond, we get a vaccine or however, we get beyond this COVID thing. So I do think there are going to be some things that are part of our new normal that are going to change. But I think you can get a lot through the distributed teams.
Got it. All right, one last question here for you. So, if we look at the software world, I'm not sure how much you, still, look at, those kinds of teams and those environments. It's been interesting to me that over the years, the past 5 years, there's just been much less discussion about Agile in the software community. And I guess I'm kind of like curious, is it because, they've just sort of absorbed it? Like this has just become so much of like the practice of how we do software that, we don't actually need to talk about it much, like we don't need people to have the instructions of how to turn on the light switch or things like that. Or if it's that, that community has almost taken what they started with Agile and evolved to something else that incorporates elements of that, but perhaps has less of a name to it. And so I guess my question is, in the context of marketing and Agile marketing, will this be something that eventually is just absorbed into the de facto way we operate, or is there's some generation we think will happen after this? Have you given any thoughts to that?
I have, and so one of the differences between developers and marketers in terms of adopting Agile is that developers were accustomed to process, right? Before there was Agile, there was waterfall. Before there was waterfall, there was object-oriented development. Before there was object-oriented development, there was structured development, okay? They have had, development processes, okay, at least since the 1960s, okay? So for a long, long time, they are accustomed to that. And so what you see is that they're a little more receptive to that and putting process in place, and that's a good thing. But I also think there's a downside to that, and that is that they focus on the process, okay? I see a lot of software development teams that they're practicing Agile. They do daily stand-ups, they do sprints, they do all that stuff, and it takes a year for you to get a change into anything that they do, right? Wait a minute, that's not what we meant when we said Agile, right? And I mean, that's the worst. And they're not all like that. There are many of them that are getting stuff out faster. But I do think that we need to revisit in the software development world what I call the beliefs and behaviors, right? So outputs, it's not just about more features, right? Who needs more features in Microsoft Office, right? I don't, okay? It's about the outcomes. How do we help people use whatever product it is to get better outcomes for what they're doing, right? I don't know if there's enough thought about that in most of the development world. And I think that marketing, maybe we'll do a little bit better job of that, because I do think a lot of marketers do think about this creating remarkable customer experiences. That's something that we aspire to as marketers. And so if we can take that process management and start to really create these remarkable customer experiences, man, we could start doing some things that even the developers didn't do. So that gets me really excited.
Awesome. All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for giving us this 45 minutes of your time. Just an amazing book you've created here. Do you want to give folks a little pitch on where they can get the book and also the other services you offer?
Yeah, sure. So you can get the book, as they say, pretty much wherever books are sold. So it's certainly available on Amazon in both hardback and in Kindle format, but it's also available at Barnes & Noble and all the other major booksellers that are out there. If you want to link to those places and exactly where, you can go to my website and say buy now, and I have the exact links for the book on all the major booksellers there. Some other things that I have, if you click on the resources button on my site, I have a number of different resources there, including, for example, a 12-week plan for adopting Agile marketing as one of the things that there, or there's a free guide to Agile marketing and some other stuff there. In terms of services that I provide, they're mainly around training and coaching. So if anyone is interested in having me train their team, I have a standard way of doing that. I am working, by the way, on online training. Hope to have that available soon, but don't quite have that yet. Of course, I do the training via Zoom today, but and then I do a lot of coaching as well, where it's not so much about a training a class, but it's more about coaching people who are already probably in the process of doing Agile marketing. So
fantastic.
Thanks, Scott. It's been a pleasure. I really had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. Louise, thank you for your question. Thanks everyone who's tuning in. Have a great week ahead, and we will catch you on the next episode. Bye.